Welcome back, and for anybody that's new, I'm Casey. So this video was a particular challenge. As you notice, it's taken me quite a while for me to come out with it. And one of the reasons why is the hours of footage. And pure simply, my editor just kept crashing. It didn't like that. Hours and hours and hours of 4K, it just didn't like. Don't quote me, but I think it was right around 10-12 hours of footage. And I even cut a lot of stuff out, because if I made one cut, I didn't show all that. Anyways, one of the biggest challenges was to try to take and make this as entertaining as possible. So I'm not going to show you every single cut I made or every single screw I put in. If I do something on one side, you can assume that I kind of do it on the other side. I'm pretty sure you'll get the gist of it. But anyways, the next thing that I want to address is I decided I'm going to take and I'm going to show you the secret compartments as the building goes along. So right before I show you making maybe a side secret compartment, I'll show you that secret compartment and then I'll show you the build of it. So not everything's going to be perfectly in order, but it should be enough where you get the gist of how I built it. And if you really wanted to, you could easily copy this. I don't have the dimensions, so you'd have to make your own dimensions for what fits best for you. But either way, it should turn out and should turn out great. This was a big challenge, but let's get to it. Oh yeah, and I did have to break this into two parts. So the first part I wanted to work on was the chessboard itself, the game table. And I knew I wanted these pieces to be 2x2 because I already figured it out, and the size of the table as well as the size of the larger pieces you can find seems to be about the happy medium. You could even go a little bit smaller if you wanted. I applied some butcher block oil so that way I can see the difference in the colors and the patterns in them, so that way I can try to match them up the best I can. Now these are recycled cutoffs from a cabinet factory around here, so I had to use my table saw as a bit of a jointer and get them squared up. And then on the back of these I marked them each differently so that way I could differentiate between the different lines of them. I wanted the patterns to match staggered every other one. And then of course I have to take and run them through the planer so that way they're the right height. And then it's off to the table saw where I'm just going to put a stop up and I'm going to cut them all to length. And then of course I got to repeat the same process but with a lighter wood. In this case I'm using yellow birch. I think it'll be a good contrast and it's available near me. Now, I'm not saying I'm really great at being safe, but when it comes to these highly repetitive tasks, you want to be very careful in order to watch, because that's when mistakes are going to happen, is when you're not actively, using your head and keeping yourself alert. So I put together this little sanding jig and it just holds them steady in there, so that way I can give them a little bit of a chamfer on the side. And I'm going to basically do that to each row, and then I'm going to have to do that to each row going the other way, all the way around all the sides. So there's going to be quite a bit to do. So it was worth it to make a quick little jig to clamp it in and hold them all nice and tight and straight. So I wanted to show you the difference that the sanding of the edges makes. If you look right here, these aren't sanded, and any little imperfection that these blocks are off, and I mean we're talking about half the thickness of a piece of paper, you can see, and it makes them look like they don't quite fit right. They also look kind of a little bit harsh around the edges, which I mean they exactly are. However, if we look up here where I've sanded these edges, they're nice and soft and rounded over. A lot of those slight blemishes, and I mean it's hard to even call them a blemish because it is super fine work. But it makes them all disappear and just makes these all look really nice and fluid. Oh, real quick, I haven't done the ones going this way yet, just this way. So what I'm doing right now is I'm applying tape to all of the edges, and that way it's going to give it a little bit of a gap in between. That'll allow it to expand and contract. I'm actually not going to glue all the individual pieces together. I kind of want this to be slightly flexible, so that way it can always return to a flat state, which is going to be inside of its housing. My apologies for some of the audio not being the best. I did record this a year ago and I knew a little less about recording. So right now I'm cutting down what's going to be the bottom side of the board, and it's 1/4 inch, I believe it's called Luan. It's basically 1/4 inch plywood. And this is a yellow birch veneer as well. Now I try to throw in as many tips as I can. My best one here is that these silicone basting brushes are awesome for wood glue, and that's so satisfying to do. Let's see that again in slow-mo. So now I just got to glue them all down in the order that I want, and I have them laid out on the side in order so that way I don't get too confused. While I'm doing this, there's 4 pieces that I'm not gluing down, which I'll show you them in a second and how they fit in. This was probably my favorite part of this whole table, is this right here. Now I just got to trim the edges down to an appropriate size. Most of the tape pulled up okay. There was a couple spots where I had to dig it out with some tweezers and I think I used a needle. But it worked out. So for the first secret compartment, I need to get a bunch of these attached to each other so that way I can kind of treat them as one big block. So I'm going to take and I'm going to cut some edges down here, and that way I can put a piece of wood in there that'll hold them together. Oh wait, I suppose we should check out what I'm working on now, huh? Alright, let's do it. Right up here on the top is the first secret spot. So we take the magnet right here and we pull the pieces back, and that comes out to reveal a little stash where you could put money or, you know, a couple pieces of jewelry or whatever you'd like. And that locks it back up. So at the beginning of the video, for all those that I confused on how I was going to do this, it probably makes a little more sense now. So right now I'm taking and I'm attaching the 4 pieces together so that way they're one unit. Now when I make cuts like this, I'm being extremely careful and I'm very well aware my fingers are. So I'm going to try to remove as much material as I can, given more options for different things to be stored in different ways, without making it where it's going to slip and slide in there too much and without compromising these. So, see what I can do. Thank you, Derek, but this thing was terrifying to use. So now I need some pins, and I just cut this out of some flat stock and finish shaping it with a file. Once they fit in there, then I can take and test it out, and it works good. So I'm making a nice border that goes around the edge. And I'm going to use this nice piece of mahogany because it has a nice contrasting color. It's not going to be the dark, it's not going to be the light, it's going to be something in between, and you'll kind of match the sides. So I'm going to cut this down into pieces, rip it down sideways, make it into corner frames like you would for a picture frame, saw the ends, put a piece of wood in there to make it stronger. Alright. The reason for gluing these together is I needed them to be a little bit thicker, so that made it into a thicker board for me. I'm sure you guys figured this out, but I'm not a woodworker, I'm more of a maker. And what that means is that some of these things may not be done perfectly right, but I'm okay with that because this is an experience for me. And I think this is my 2nd or 3rd major build with wood. So I don't think it turned out too bad, but you'll have to wait and see. Now for the design of this, some of it was constraints that I had. Like as an example, he wanted a certain width, a certain length, and a certain height. And then he wanted a place for his toes to be able to fit underneath. Aside from that, it was basically up to me to come up with whatever design that I thought would work for the project and try to fit in a chess table, gaming table situation. While this guy's blabbing, hey guys, I just wanted to point out that part 2 did turn out better, so when it's out, feel free to check that one out if this one's a little bit too melancholy for your taste. But for the 4 that are still with me, let's get back to the video. And then right now down here, I'm going to add some boards going this way, and that's because I want the strength to go the length of this mostly, and that's because of some other different areas that I'm going to fit into here as I go to put it together. I'm planning to put a false bottom in anyways in all of these areas, so that's going to cover up any of those ends of the plywood that may come out. So at this stage I decided I'm not going to take it completely apart and glue it all up. I'm actually going to just take in, I have a bunch of screws that I'm going to add in that I haven't done yet. This thing is pretty much a tank as it is, and it'll be more serviceable if it's not glued. So if something were to break or something warped, it could be adjusted easier if it's not all glued together. What I've decided on the edges here is I'm going to take and I'm going to put it on my table saw, and I'm going to rip this down, sinking this board into the proper level. It's going to be a little bit sketchy because of the fact of having this big thing up on a table saw, but I'm going to take my time and it should be fine. The other thing that I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be putting the bottoms in these and getting the cubby started. Alright, so now I'm going to cut off some pieces that are going to go on the sides in order to cover up those edges on there. And then I'm going to also make a false bottom for there, and I'm going to make a bottom for there that's actually going to be a permanent bottom. And they are going to look alike, so that way it's hard to tell the difference between the two. I'm also going to take and work on making the boxes for the drawers over here as well as over there. And I'm going to take and I'm going to make the stands for the bottom part. Okay, so I cut the notch for these ones too much. I don't know, just got a little carried away, so I'm making some new ones. I don't know at this point if I'm making a table or firewood, but we'll see. That's a nice way to hold that square. So this isn't completely dry, and normally I'm really against this. However, you're not going to be able to see this very much at all. It's a very hidden part. It's not like a faceboard or something like a lot of people do, but I am going to tack it together with some of these brad nails. I think they're brad nails. I'm not sure if this is the best way to do this, but I've taken, and this is the width that I need it finally. But that's not accounting for this, so I'm just gonna put that back there as a spacer. The front of this, I'm gonna take and I'm gonna leave that unscrewed, and it's actually gonna pivot on the back. But there's gonna be a stopper, so it only goes so far down. And I'm gonna have that stopper at a bit of an angle. So that way it can be lifted and pulled out, and that'll make more sense later. So now on the ends, we open this up, and everything looks normal, looks like a usable area. However, there's actually a stash right here on both sides. I got some scraps of maple I'm going to be using, so I'll help cut down a little bit on the cost, but I got these from a local cabinet shop. A lot of those cabinet shops throw out stuff like this because they can't use it for anything, but I'll use it. I had to make a small repair here, but it was very easily done. Now I didn't show it in this video, but when I decided where to have all of these cubby spaces, a careful consideration I had is when this is sitting there, how easy is it going to be to know that there's a space missing? And I wanted somebody to be able to use this for a long time and never really realize, hey, wait a minute, there's a space underneath here that should have something there. So that was one of my goals, is to place things just right, and I think I did a pretty good job. All right, while I wait for the glue on the drawers, I'm going to take and I'm going to be putting some maple on top of here, getting rid of this unsightly edge. And then I'm going to be attaching a piece of plywood right here that the hinges are going to go on. And what that's going to allow me to do is attach it with screws through the back, and then if it ever needs adjusting, it can be adjusted from back there without having to move it here. It also keeps the fasteners in here where it's not really going to be seen because of the line of sight. So this idea ended up not working, and unfortunately it meant that inside of here there was a couple unsightly holes. And right now the owner is going to check the table because he probably never realized that they are there. This opens and it's not going to clear the boards how I had wanted. So I think I'm going to take a break, and I'll probably cut some test pieces. I'm not sure if you guys realize how devastating this was for me, that it didn't open right and I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And I realized that I was about halfway through my footage. So see you in part 2. Alright guys, that was part 1. Part 2 should come out soon because of the fact, like I said, I edited the whole thing. I wanted to see how much I could condense it down to first, so I knew if I could do this within one part or not, and I couldn't. So there is going to be 2 parts, and the next one should come out soon. Can't wait to see you then. Till then, keep creating.